not here to sugarcoat. Life's already a bumpy road. Too much shelter causes pain. Let's just be real honest. Things are gonna knock you down. Avoidance will not help you out. Let's talk it through here. Keep it real honest.
Welcome to Real Honest, the podcast where I share candid thoughts and feelings about love, life, and relationships, God and church, adulting, the workplace, and everything in between. I'm your host, Samantha Labat, and you may not always like me, but I'll always be honest with you. Hey friends, this week we are talking about miscommunications and expectations. I already did an episode on expectations, but I think that's going to just keep popping back up. I want to kind of pull back to like the point of the podcast and like what we're doing here, because I had like so many conversations about this in the past week. So first of all, this is not a platform for me to like air grievances or like other people's dirty laundry. I'm not telling other people's stories. I'm only telling my own stories. I'm sharing my personal thoughts and feelings about things. I do not think that I am better than anybody else. I do not think that the way that I live life is the correct way to live life. When I'm out here sharing my thoughts and feelings, it's just that. I'm not saying that you should think the same way as me. I'm not saying that you should feel the same way as me. I am just offering a perspective to help you think about things. When I launched the podcast, it really was because I am an external processor. Okay, that means that I talk out loud to process my thoughts and feelings and to organize them. And that's how I learn about myself, and that's how I draw conclusions. That's why I go to therapy. That's what I do in therapy, is I spend an hour every month processing through a topic that I'm either confused how I feel about it or I don't have clarity on it. And my therapist asks me like pointed questions that help me get to whatever I'm trying to learn or whatever I'm trying to feel or whatever I'm missing, whatever's underneath, whatever it is. Like that's what therapy does for me personally. Because I am an external processor, I spend a lot of time either talking to a friend on the phone or sending like long Snapchat stories or lots of voice notes. I spend a lot of time doing that. And a lot of the time, I don't even like need the friend to listen to it and send it back to me. It's just an exercise that I do that helps me get my thoughts out. It's like a like journaling out loud, I guess, which I do also journal, and that helps me as well. So just something I noticed was that whenever there was something on my heart and mind that I wanted to process through, or that I wanted to hear other people's thoughts on, or maybe my friend sent me a long voice note and he or she was processing through something, and then I reached out, I gave them my thoughts, but then I reached out to other people to be like, what do you think about this? And then I would go back to that friend and I'd be like, hey, I asked my sister, my mom, my other friend, I asked them about, that thing that you were thinking about, and like, here's some thoughts they had. And the person would usually come back and say, oh, that's a really interesting perspective. I didn't think of it that way. Like, thanks for sharing. And that's kind of why I turned it into the podcast, because I was like, instead of me recording a really long voice note and sending it individually to 20 people, I can just upload it to Apple Podcasts and everyone can listen like on their own time, and they could either respond to me or not. And then when other people share their thoughts with me, whether you guys call me, text me, email me, whatever, and then I also incorporate thoughts and ideas that you guys have as well to help people get a stronger picture of whatever the topic is. My goal is never to tell you what to think or how to think or what to do. It's just to give you options and new perspective. I had an overwhelming number of people reach out last week, and it was all over the map in terms of people that were upset with me, people that were like, oh my gosh, that really helped me, people that just like had general thoughts they wanted to share. And like, that's the whole purpose for me, is that like you learn something new or you hear something or you grow. I had a lot of conversations in the past week that I don't think I would have had if I had not released the podcast last week. So I'll just use this to segue into what I'm learning from God right now. And part of why I enrolled in seminary was because I wanted to have better empathy. I don't feel like that's a strong skill of mine, and I feel like seminary is something that will get that for me, mostly because I volunteer with a very, very large church, and I interact with people of all different ages, all different cultures, all over the world, all different backgrounds. And I have a difficult time relating to people that are very different than me. And so I want to make sure that I am doing my very best to love people that are very different from me just as well as I love people that are similar to me. So I'll get into this more like in the end when I get to the hard conversation of the week. But I had like some hard conversations in the last few days that just as a result of the podcast that I think were very like helpful and helped to grow me and to shift perspective and to help strengthen my empathy bone. So that actually was pretty cool. It, didn't happen in the way that I would have liked it to happen, as most things in life do. Moving into the goals check-in, I pretty much, same as last week, no change, have not opened Scrivener. Absolutely no writing has been done. I am hoping to make some time tomorrow, but who knows? All right, let's talk about expectations. So I mentioned this before on a previous full episode that I did about expectations, but in my personal opinion, I think that expectations are formed by behavior. So for example, I expect Cameron to answer the phone 80 to 85% of the time that I call him, because historically that's about how often he answers. And when he does not answer, I expect him to call me back within 24 hours or to text me immediately and say, like, what do you need? Like, do you need me right now or can you need me later? Because that's historically what he's done. So if I meet a new person and I have a question or I want to talk to them or whatever, and I call them, I don't have an expectation that they will answer the phone or not. Like, I may be hopeful that they'll answer the phone. I might be anxious about it, but I'm not going to expect them to either pick up or ignore my call, because I have no pattern of behavior to have formed an expectation. So I mentioned like my birthday trip that I'm about to go on the podcast last week. And people were very divided on, the birthday being about the birthday girl versus the trip being like everyone do what they want to do. So pretty overwhelmingly, you guys hold the opinion that when it comes to a birthday or a wedding or a bachelor or bachelorette, the event is all about the birthday boy or girl, the bride or the groom, or the couple getting married, which is like, you go on the trip and you do whatever the person being celebrated wants to do for the trip. But then if it's not for a birthday, you guys are pretty overwhelmingly have the consensus that then it's each man for himself. Like whoever's planning the trip like sends out, here are the options of what we can do, and then everybody just kind of picks and chooses what they want to do, and everyone kind of does their own thing, and there's less of an expectation of everybody being together the whole time. I'm not saying that either of those camps is correct. I'm just saying with the conversations that I had with my listeners in the past week is that it was overwhelmingly more people were like, well, yeah, of course, you just do whatever the person being celebrated wants to do. That being said, of the people coming on this trip, I have expectations for exactly 2 of the people invited, one being my mother, because I've spent a significant amount of time with my mother, and I know how she is. I know what she likes to do. I know what time she wakes up, what time she goes to sleep. I know when she gets tired. I know what energizes her. I am expecting my mother to make it through like half a day at Disneyland and to be over it. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying that's what I expect. She doesn't like to stand in lines. My mom and I are just not into the same things. Like she's not enthralled by magic and wonder in the way that I am. Like I really like action movies. She really likes Westerns. Like, we're just not into the same stuff. And so because I love Disney. You guys, I love Disney. And I just like, I love the rides. I love the food. I love the Loungefly backpacks. Like I love all of it. And my mom's just not into it. She's like, I don't get why people like spend so much money on this. And then one of my friends, she and I have been on a Disney trip together before, and I've been on multiple other trips with her. So again, I know like what time she likes to wake up, go to sleep. I know what she's into, not into. I know what she's willing to do, not willing to do. Everybody else coming on the trip, I have never been on a trip with. So I do not have any expectation whatsoever because I have no past set of data to draw from to build my expectation from. So when I was talking about like being frustrated about how plans were being made and like what people were choosing to participate in and whatnot, part of that frustration is that I could not reasonably expect everyone to be on the same page. Like this is a learning experience, right? So it's like I have to just see how people react to stuff and what people are willing to do. And, you know, there's, of course, I have a wish list. Like I have a desire of how I would like the trip to go and what I would like to do. And, you know, but it's just kind of I know that things are not going to go 100% according to how I want them to. And I think that's okay. I think that I can still be frustrated by it because at the end of the day, our feelings are our feelings and our feelings don't have to be rational. I think that our feelings are often not rational. And I think we more just need to think about like how much we're letting our feelings affect our actions. So like, for example, because I fully expect my mom to make it like half a day and then be over it and be like, I'm going to go lay at the pool. Because I expect her to do that, it would be, I think, inappropriate of me to like lash out at her and be like, how dare you leave the park and go lay at the pool? You don't love me. Because I know her and I fully expect her to do that. But that doesn't change the fact that I'm gonna be disappointed when it happens. So I am preparing for that disappointment. And I think that's a point of clarity that I want to make as well, is the whole like, you know, the whole episode last week was talking about being known, feeling seen and feeling known and feeling loved and feeling unloved. That's an exercise that my therapist had me do years ago, was she had me ask each of my family members what I do that makes them feel loved. And no one in my family was able to answer this question except my dad. And his answer was that he feels loved knowing that all of his daughters are self-sufficient and have bought houses and have made investments of some kind. And so none of those things are things that I do to him or with him or for him. That's a list of things that he told me to do that I did. So like I took that back to my therapist and she was like, okay, that's really interesting. Like that's a takeaway for you because you now understand that your dad values, you know, he values money, you know, he values financial management, and he taught you and your sisters to manage finances, and you all have followed his teaching, and that makes him feel really good. That makes him feel important. That makes him feel loved. Now, that's very different from him saying like, I feel loved when you call me. I feel loved when you come over to the house and spend time with me. Like those are the kind of things that my therapist and I were looking for when I asked my family. And so then she and I had a really interesting conversation where she's like, how do you feel about the fact that like your sisters and your mom like couldn't really answer the question? And I was like, I feel shitty because I feel like since they're unable to come up with examples of things that I do that make them feel loved, I feel like that means that I don't make them feel loved. And she was like, okay, what are things they do that make you feel loved? And I couldn't answer the question. And I was like, because I don't feel loved by them. And so I like spent months like very intentionally like thinking about ways that I could make my family feel loved and ways that they could make me feel loved. And so at the time, I had a conversation with my dad and I said, like, here's the question that I asked you and here's the answer that you gave me. And I just wanted to tell you that, like, that's not really what I was looking for. Like, I'm looking for more like what's something that I can regularly do, like, do you feel loved when I call and ask you for advice? Do you feel loved when I go to dinner with you? Like just regular actions that I can take. At the time, we were having dinner together once a month, I think. And we would almost always go to a sports bar, and my dad would watch the game and not speak to me the whole meal. And that made me feel so unloved. And I was like, why am I here? Like, you keep asking me to go to dinner, but then you don't talk to me the whole time. Like, you don't even look at me. You're watching the game. Like, this is a waste of your money and it's a waste of my time. And at the time when I said that to him, his response was something like, I'm never going to be able to communicate like the way that you want me to. I'm just not like that. I'm just not built that way. And that really hurt me because I said, like, I'm telling you what I need to feel loved, and what I need from you to feel your love is I need you to talk to me. I need you to acknowledge my feelings. I need you to acknowledge that I'm sad or I'm angry or I'm lonely or whatever it is. And I need you to talk to me. And he was basically like, I'm not doing that. And so I was like, because I have laid out for you and told you exactly what I need you to do to make me feel loved, and you won't do it, like, that communicates to me that you don't care that I don't feel loved by you. Now, is that a rational feeling? Probably not. Is it true? No. But there's a difference between intellectually being aware that my dad loves me and then being able to feel it because of actions that he takes, right? So this was years ago. We've since moved past this. I think I told you guys in a previous episode that I wrote my dad a letter, try it again. And so I wrote him a letter essentially saying the same stuff, but this was more recent, like later in life. And so the past few times that I have been to dinner with my dad, we have not gone to a sports bar. We've gone to places that don't have TVs, and he talks to me. And I can tell that he's really working at it. Like, I look at him and I see like the gears turning in his head, that he's like anytime there's kind of like a lull or an uncomfortable silence, he's kind of like, oh no, I'm not talking. Like, I need to be talking because she feels loved when I talk. And I kind of, it's a little bit of a struggle for me because I can tell that it's difficult for him and taking effort. And I don't want him to be uncomfortable. But at the same time, like, I feel so loved. Like, I see and I hear and I feel him saying, I heard you. I heard what you need, and I want you to know that I love you, and I want you to feel that I love you. So I'm also taking the action to make sure that you feel it. And that, like, really, really, really means the world to me. But there are also miscommunications that can happen when you have conversations like this. So for example, like years ago when my dad said, like, I don't communicate that way, and I said, like, I don't feel loved by you. It was a larger, like, I didn't feel loved by him at all. Like, he wasn't doing anything that made me feel loved. And I had a friend reach out to me to be like, it's kind of ridiculous that, like, you think none of your friends love you because they don't want to go to breakfast at 7 a.m. at Disney. Like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, I didn't say I feel like they don't love me, like, in general as people. I said that specific action makes me feel unloved, which is different. Like, with my dad, it was the whole of him as a person, like, he wasn't doing anything. So I was like, coming on the trip makes me feel loved. Like, that's a singular, that one action in itself. Coming on the trip makes me feel loved. And then attending each of the things that I plan makes me feel loved. Like, each ride that I want to ride, whoever rides it with me is going to make me feel loved. So it's just kind of like it's like it's filling the love bucket or drawing out from it. It's not like, oh, since you came on the trip but you won't go to breakfast, I hate you. Like, I didn't say that. That's not what I was trying to communicate. But that's what a lot of people heard. So that's another thing where, like, I was told that I don't communicate clearly. Literally everything that I said on the podcast, I have said to all of the girls coming on the trip in different words. And so that's also difficult for me because, for example, I said to them, I said the words, I don't feel loved because you guys aren't participating in like all the stuff that I'm saying I want to do. And a couple people responded and said like, oh, it has nothing to do about loving you. Like, we're just not morning people. And I was just like, okay. And so one of them was telling me, she's like, your response to that should have been, it's very important to me that you come to breakfast. And I was like, literally, like me saying, I don't feel love that you won't come. That was me saying that's important to me that you come, right? Like, to me, those two sentences communicate that same sentiment, but to her, it didn't. So I have no way to know that, right? Like, I have no way to know, to everybody listening to this podcast, you're all hearing my words through your own worldview and your own lens. And you're all hearing something different. You're all receiving something different. And I have absolutely no way to know what you are receiving unless you tell me. And if you're receiving something that is far off base from what I'm trying to say, I can attempt to correct that with you. Like, I can have a one-on-one conversation with you and I can try to explain in different words what I'm trying to say here, but that's not going to guarantee that you will understand it. Like, I think that I am being abundantly clear. I'm very, very careful with my words because I want to be clear and I desperately want to be heard and understood. So I feel like when I spend an hour like explaining something, saying 2 + 2 = 4, and then somebody responds to me and says, you said 2 + 2 = 5. And I'm like, no, I didn't. Like, that's infuriating. And that makes me feel like I'm not being heard. It makes me feel like I'm not being listened to. And, you know, part of what I was wondering is like, why is it such a big deal to me? Like, why is the birthday thing like such a big deal? Because I had a couple people tell me that like, you know, I'm so selfish. Like, how dare I like want everyone to be with me the whole time on my birthday trip? And I was like, you know, it could be because I felt really neglected for most of my childhood. Obviously, like, not my needs or anything. Like, you know, I was very well off growing up. But I mean, like, I felt emotionally neglected. Like, I just felt like my family didn't see me and my family didn't hear me, and my family all more or less speaks the same love languages and mine are different. And I felt like my love languages weren't being spoken, and I felt like I wasn't being cared for well emotionally. And I feel like I have been called selfish so often. Like, I feel like growing up, I was just constantly being told, it's not about you. It's not for you. It's not about you. Like, I hate Omaha. And we used to have to drive to Omaha every year to see our grandparents. And I'd be like, why do we have to do this? And my mom would be like, because your grandparents want to see you. And I'd be like, well, send them a picture, you know? And she's like, you're so selfish. Like, you can take a weekend to spend with your grandparents. And I just like did not want to. And like, I didn't want to give up my room when my grandma would come stay with us for Thanksgiving. Like, I'd have to give her my bed in my room, and I didn't want to do that. And I was always like, you're so selfish. Like, it's not about you. It's not about you. And so just hearing that like over and over again so frequently, I think maybe I like latched on to my birthday because your birthday seems to be an acceptable day that you can be selfish and that you can let things be about you. So last week I also gave some examples of like experiences I have had that weren't great for me, but it was about my friend, right? Where like I will go to the club with a friend when I hate the club, or like waiting for a wedding that started late where like I was uncomfortable, but I was like, it's not about me, it's about the bride, and like I'm here to support her. So it's that kind of stuff where it's like, sure, I'm at the club and an ugly man is hitting on me and the floor is sticky and I don't like drinking, but I look over and my friend is dancing and she's smiling and having a great time. And it's like, it's worth it. You know, the sticky floor and the gross man, like, it's worth it because she's having a great time. This is what she wants. She's happy that I'm here. Like, I'm here to support her. You know, that's all it is. And unfortunately, you know, like one of my friends heard the story of like, okay, so essentially you're saying like, you didn't have a good time at my wedding, so I need to go have a bad time at your birthday and get up earlier than I want to and be uncomfortable. And I was like, oh my gosh, no. Like, that's not what I'm saying at all. That is absolutely not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that in my personal opinion, if I am celebrating a friend's birthday, I'm going to do whatever they want for the duration of their party. If their party is 4 hours, if it's 6 hours, if it's one full day, if it's a trip and it's a full weekend, if it's an entire week, whatever the duration of their celebration is, I'm doing whatever they want to do. Like, they're picking the restaurants, they're picking the movies, they're picking the wake up time, the sleep time, whatever. It's all about them. Like, that's just how I personally feel. Same thing with weddings and bachelor, bachelorette, any of that stuff. So I was telling her, like, I was just giving examples of things like that where I've done that for other people and how I would like that to be reciprocated for me. But now that we've had this conversation, I understand that you don't see these things the same way at all. Like, I now am aware that I cannot have that expectation of you. And that's okay. You know, I still feel a way about it, right? Like, I'm still just like the same thing with my mom. Like, when she's going to go spend a day at the pool and like not spend the day with me, that's going to bother me. Okay. It's going to bother me. It's going to sting. But she has every right to not feel the way that I feel. And that's also why it's so frustrating to me when people call me selfish, because I am like, I spend all of my time thinking about other people. Like, I don't check on all my friends every day for me. I check on them for them because I care about them and I love them and I want them to know that I love them and I want them to know that I'm here and I support them. And I want, like, that's why I write all my e-group members like job interviews and birthdays and stuff in my planner, because I want them to feel seen and known and loved on a regular basis. And I want to do everything that I can to make that happen. It was an interesting week because an overwhelming number of people like agreed with me, but the handful of people that did not, like, that were, I don't want to say did not agree with me, but the handful of people that were like, felt like I was so rude last week and I just like went in so hard on these girls and I'm a terrible person. Like, the people that received like judgment and anger and me just raking these girls through the coals last week, what I learned in talking to the people that felt that way is that they don't know me well, which honestly was proving my point of the whole episode last week that was about, how well somebody knows you. It's unfortunate to me, but it also explains a lot, because it kind of goes back to that Tom Holland interview where he says, like, if you have a problem with me, text me. And if you don't have my number, then you don't know me well enough to have a problem with me. So I think it's like when somebody dislikes you and they don't know you, then their opinion is irrelevant. But if somebody dislikes you and they do know you, then you sit there and you have to wonder, like, okay, since they know me really well and they have this negative view of me, is that really who I am, or is that what I'm portraying, and how do I fix that? And I feel like that's what I was wrestling with, because even though it was a very small number of people who had like a very negative opinion of me last week, it was people that I would expect would know me better because of the amount of time that I've known them. But I think that it's kind of similar to the example that I gave you guys last week of like my sister asking, like, did you know that Ariana's new album is out, as opposed to what do you think of it? You know, where it's like you would expect that your sister would know you pretty well. But honestly, like, my sisters don't know me that well. And I don't know my sisters that well because we don't talk every day like that. Like, we don't share everything with each other. We don't like really open up. We're not on that level with each other. And to the person that was like, ugh, well, Cameron's so perfect and I'm tired of hearing about him. Like, first of all, Cameron's not perfect, okay? Like, Cameron is my best friend. He is my person. And he knows me the best because he's known me since I was 6. So, like, at the end of the day, Cameron's always going to know me best, because anyone that becomes my friend from this point on in my life, he's got a more than 20-year head start on them. So it's just kind of like, you can't replace time and you can't speed up time. And ultimately, when it comes to getting to know someone, spending time with them is going to be your biggest asset, but it also depends on the quality of the time. Like when you're spending the time with the person, are you guys sitting down and talking and learning about each other? Or are you like doing some activity? Like maybe you're going to concerts together and there's no time to really talk to each other and get to know each other. I still learn new things about Cameron all the time. Like just yesterday, I was writing a paper for seminary and I needed to talk to people who have de-churched. And I'm like, Cameron doesn't go to church anymore. Like, let me get his opinion. And so I texted him just to be like, hey, I'm writing a paper and is there anything that like would make you want to go back to church or that would make you be open to go back to church or something, I think. And like he was hanging out with a friend of his who also doesn't go to church anymore. And the two of them like sat down and like recorded like them talking about it for a few minutes and like sent it back to me. And I literally was shocked. Like I was pleasantly surprised. I was shocked. They gave me more than enough like response that I needed to write my paper. But also like Cameron and I don't talk about church. We don't really talk about God. It just doesn't come up a whole lot. And I haven't ever like asked him about his experience like with church. Like it's not something that we've ever like really sat down and explored. And I think like when I was like so surprised that I got this response from him, I think I was like, I don't know, like have I been scared to discuss this with him? And I think that is something that comes up with friends a lot, is like people that you don't know well. I think you have more of a fear of conflict because it's like, oh no, like this could end the relationship. Whereas like with Cameron, I don't fear conflict because nothing is ending our relationship. Like it's just, he is stuck with me until one of us is dead. So it's just like absolutely nothing can end it. But that's not to say like that he's perfect and that we never fight. Like literally the last time Cameron was at my house, he said something about like I have an end table that's like next to my front door, and he was like, this is an end table and it should be like at the end of your couch. It shouldn't, like, this isn't a piece that like goes here, and starts like telling me how I need to rearrange the room or whatever. And it really bothered me. Like it really, really bothered me because I was like, did I ask for your advice on the decor of my room? And like after he left, I spent the next many weeks looking around like, now I need to rearrange my furniture and redecorate because Cameron doesn't like how it looks. And it made me like second guess my house and like that I'm a bad decorator, and I was feeling like I make everything look ugly, and it just made me feel like bad. But I never like called him to be like, hey, it really bothered me that like you said that thing about my end table or whatever, because for one, like it's just so stupid and it's just not worth it. But for two, it's like it's not a hill I care to die on. Like it's not deep enough to fight about. And so I think that's been an interesting thing with the podcast, because I definitely have like had some episodes where people are like, why didn't you talk to me about XYZ? And I'm like, maybe it wasn't an issue to me until I like sat down and started processing it by way of recording my podcast. And that's when I realized myself that it was a bigger issue. Like, I don't really know. I had an episode a while back where I talked about like my depression and anxiety and like not wanting to be on this earth. And my mom got so upset with me after I published that episode. I mean, she like sent me a really long message about how it was so inappropriate and it was wrong of me, and just can't believe that I said the things I said, and I'm so terrible. And she like emailed our travel agent and was like, remove me from this trip, I'm not going. And I was just like, what is going on? Like literally what's going on? And so she came over to talk to me about it, and she was telling me how like the episode just hurt her to her core. Like she just kept repeating that over and over again, that she was hurt to her core. And I'm sitting there like, I didn't even say anything about you. Like I said, I struggle to live in this world. I think the world is hard to be in. I think it's really hard to make friends. It's hard to work. Just the cycle of like you live to work to stay alive, to keep working. Like what's the point of anything? And like I'm trying to get closer to God so that I feel like I have a purpose, so that I don't go insane of just spinning the wheel of doing the same thing every day. But I never said like, I feel this way because I have terrible parents or like my mom ruined my life or anything like that. So I was just so confused of like why she was so bothered by it. And then like she explains to me that she was hurt because to hear that her daughter is struggling so much and know that there's nothing she can do about it, like that hurt her. And I was like, oh, that makes sense, right? But it took her a few days to process that that's what she was upset about and to get there. When she listened to that podcast episode, she got so emotional, her body went into fight or flight. And all that her body knew was that she was sobbing, she was sad, she was angry. And then she started lashing out by writing me that long text and then was like, you know, I don't want to talk to her. I don't want to see her. I'm not going to go on the trip. Like just all of this crazy, like that was irrational. It had nothing to do with the podcast or anything that like the feelings themselves were irrational, but that doesn't negate the fact that those were her feelings and that's how she felt. And then after she took the time to like think about it and we talked it out, and then I like really understood like, okay, this is the underlying thing. This is the issue. So same thing with like last week when I mentioned the stuff with the trip. Like one of my friends who's not going on the trip, she was saying to me that she's like, you know, just listening to you having these like really high expectations for friends of like you're getting upset that like people aren't booking their flights when you want them to, and they're not going to breakfast when you want them to. And she's like, it just made me think about like putting myself in your shoes. Like what if I'm doing the best I can? Like what if I can't book my flight until a week out because I don't have the money? And what if I literally cannot wake up that early? And like, you know, like, but I'm doing the very best that I can and I want to celebrate my friend, and my friend's telling me it's not good enough and I'm not good enough. And that makes me really sad. And I was like, you know, that's a really interesting perspective because I don't see it that way at all. Like, I am not saying that these girls coming on my birthday trip are not good enough. I'm not saying that they're terrible friends. I'm not saying I dislike them. I'm saying I am frustrated with all of the issues that have arisen in planning this trip. And I am frustrated that we all don't see the like celebrating a birthday the same way. But you know, to take that to the extreme of that means that I hate all of them and I think they're terrible people and I think they're terrible friends. Like, you know, again, it's like the action of me saying, this is what I'm going to do on my birthday. Like on my birthday, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to go to my character breakfast at 7 a.m. And then for you to say, I'm not a morning person, I'm not going. That action in itself of like not coming to breakfast on my birthday, that action makes me feel unloved. That is completely separate from saying you as a person make me feel unloved and there's nothing you do that makes me feel loved. That's not what I said. And that's not what I meant, and that's not what I was trying to convey. It's so frustrating when there are miscommunications because it's like you can't know if somebody heard something totally different than what you said. Like just the other day, I was out to dinner with some classmates from seminary, and I was sitting across the table from this guy who is so nice. And he's really good at active listening. Like he makes eye contact to the point where it made me uncomfortable. Like his eyes were like just boring into me. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, can you stop staring at me so deeply? Like, can you look down at your taco? Like, what's going on here? And so the conversation though was not great for me. You know, he asked like, where did you grow up? We basically were going around the table and everybody was talking about where they're from, and everybody was from somewhere that's not here. So me, I was like, I'm from here. I grew up here. And so he was like, oh, did you go to Chesterfield Press? Which I don't know what Chesterfield Press is. I've never heard of it. But I'm just used to living in St. Louis. I'm used to where'd you go to high school? Because that's what everybody asks. Like as soon as you say you're from St. Louis, the very next question is where'd you go to high school? So he didn't ask where I went to high school. He asked if I went to Chesterfield Press, and I said, no, I went to Lafayette. And he was like, wait, is Chesterfield Press a school? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. But then, like, we kind of moved on to, like, what part of town do you live in? And so I told him, and he's like, I don't know where that is. And so I'm just kind of thinking to myself, like, why, if you're not familiar with the St. Louis area, why would you bother asking about specific places and like where I live if you don't have the context to know where that is? And Chesterfield Presbyterian is what he was referring to. It's a church, which I figured out later in the conversation, which, like, as seminary students, it does make sense to ask people where they go to church. And we go to a Presbyterian seminary. So most of the students are Presbyterian and assume that everybody's Presbyterian. I am not Presbyterian. I'm non-denominational. So that also was just a thing. I'm just like, I don't like that when assumptions are made like that. But it like the whole time we were talking, I was thinking about The Sims. Seriously, because if you guys have ever played The Sims, you can make two Sims like only have friendly socials with each other, and then randomly, like, they'll start fighting, or one of them will get uncomfortable or embarrassed, and it'll like minus the relationship bar. Like their friendship will fall instead of gain. And you're sitting there getting upset with your sim because you're like, I've only had you doing friendly socials. Like, why are you uncomfortable? What did you say that was stupid? And it's just like, it's conversations like I had with this guy. Like, it was awkward. It was awkward and uncomfortable of a conversation. Like, we were both perfectly nice and perfectly pleasant to each other, but that didn't stop it from being awkward. But what was nice is I had just watched this guy on Instagram who was talking about like dating and how part of the issues with dating is like people go on one bad date, they have one bad conversation and they throw it all away, or they have one good date and one good conversation and they start planning a wedding. And he's like, we need to scale it back and just let that experience be that experience. And one bad conversation doesn't mean that you're only going to have bad conversations, just like one good conversation doesn't mean you're only going to have good conversations. And so I was just like, I think in the past I would have walked away from that conversation either feeling like I'm really awkward or he's really awkward. But I walked away from that conversation feeling like neither of us is awkward people. We are two people that had an awkward conversation, and it's over. And we'll see each other again and have a normal one. And we did tonight. So great. Really cool thing that happened this weekend was I hung out with one of the girls that is in one of my classes at seminary, and she's awesome. And oh my gosh, I thought she was so cool. Like, she's reading Iron Flame right now, which is book 2 after Fourth Wing. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, she's reading my favorite book, and she's the same age as me, and she's a homeowner, and I'm just like, oh my God, like, she's so cool. Like, she just was so fun to talk to, and she was like really interested in like why I'm so obsessed with Disney, like genuinely, like, what do you love about Disney? What's your favorite park? Like, really cared. But also, like, I didn't do all the talking, and I'm very, very self-conscious about that because I've been told in the past that I talk too much, and also that I am super selfish and self-centered, and I always turn the conversation back to myself, which my therapist explained to me is something that certain personality types do in order to connect. So what I mean by this is like, so for example, this girl has a dog. Right? So she would say like, I have a dog. I'd be like, oh, my parents have a dog. And to me, I'm saying that because I'm wanting to connect with her. And I don't have a dog, but I do know people that have a dog. And so since she loves dogs, I'm like, I don't love dogs, but there are people that I'm close to that love dogs. And that's kind of a connection. That's what I'm trying to do. But there are people who receive that. So like if you are the person who says I have a dog and you hear me say, oh, my mom has a dog, instead of receiving that as me making a connection, you may receive that as me not caring that you have a dog and pointing the conversation back to me. And I have gotten that feedback before in the past of like, most people that I was engaging with at the time were people that were receiving it as me dismissing them and saying that I don't care about them. So it was really cool that she did not receive it that way, but also I made sure to like ask her a lot of questions and make sure that she was talking a lot. And it was her and another girl from seminary, like the three of us were hanging out, and both of them like shared so much with me about their personal stories. And I was just like so honored that they had so much to say to me. Like you guys, like emotions are everything to me because I'm so emotional. And that is like the thing that makes me feel the most loved is when somebody sees me as a safe person to share their true heart and soul with. Like Cameron called me crying for the first time in our lives last year. And when I tell you guys that I got so excited, I know that this sounds awful. I was not excited that he had something going on that caused him to cry, obviously. But I was excited that he called me, that he was like, Samantha is who I need right now. Like, I want her advice. I want her listening ear, because I have been calling him crying like every week since I was 13 years old. And it just like, it's so meaningful to me when somebody like trusts me that much. And it's funny because like my sisters do not cry in front of me ever. My sisters don't like to cry. And so if they do cry, they cry alone, and they're like, that's not something I want to share with people. I wouldn't say that I like to cry. I mean, I don't enjoy crying, but it's very cathartic. I like the release that crying gives me. And so if I feel safe enough with you to cry in front of you, it's like, you're it. Like, you are my bestie. This is why, like, situationship man, like, he cried in front of me one day and I was like, it's over. I'm in love with you forever. Like, shit. And this is probably why he will never speak to me again, because we had an agreement and I just got obsessed with him. But honestly, it's his fault because he cried, and that it became the best night of my life. I was like, oh my gosh, he trusts me. Like, give me a true, honest, vulnerable man, and like, it's just over. But so neither of these girls cried, but I mean, they did, like, they went deep and shared a lot of stuff, and it was very different from like the conversation that the guy was having as far as like, what church do you go to and where do you live? Like, if you go around the table and everybody lists what church they go to and where they live, I'm not going to remember that at the end of the night. But I do remember the stories that one of the girls shared about her family members and about her friends, and just sharing with me what she loves and what she's excited about and what she's afraid of. Like, I got to know her. Like, I don't know anything about the guy that I had the awkward conversation with aside from what church he goes to. But the girl that I talked to later in the evening, I know a lot about her. Like, I know who she is as a person, and I think she's a good person, and I'm very, very excited to know her. And so it was like I was talking to these girls and I just was like, oh my gosh, I want to be their best friends. But then I was thinking about that thing I saw on Instagram where the guy was like, you go on one date and then you plan the whole wedding, because that's totally me. Like, I totally used to do that. And so I was like, I'm going to chill out and I'm going to just let this one night, these good conversations just be what they are. And if we have more, then great. And if we don't, then, you know, I'm going to be okay. And like, one of the girls in class tonight, she sat next to me and I was like, oh my gosh, my new friend sat next to me. I'm literally so excited. I don't have her number yet because I'm trying not to be a psycho. Like, I literally was sitting in class trying so hard not to be like, can I please have your number because I want to hang out with you and become best friends. Like, I literally wanted to say that to her so badly. I think she's so cool. But, you know, this is something that happens to me a lot where, like, I meet a new person, we have a really good conversation, especially in the midst of a week where I'm having really difficult conversations with people that I've known longer. And I'm like, oh no, like, if I'm losing these friends, let me get a new one. So I think, like, that's just something that I want to work on, is just kind of on both ends, like whether it's a really exciting thing or a really stressful thing, just being able to sit in that, okay, I just had a really good conversation. That doesn't mean that I'm going to have another one the next time I talk to this person, but I might. And that's awesome. If this is the only conversation I have with them, at least I'm grateful that it was great. And the same thing where, like, if I'm having a difficult conversation or a stressful conversation, like the stressful conversation might take days. It might take weeks, it might take months to like sort through whatever it is. But that it doesn't have to be the end of the world. Like, it doesn't have to mean that the friendship is ending. It could be. But it also, like, just because we have a stressful conversation today doesn't mean that it's going to be stressful the next time we talk. And I think it's more just like, let everything be what it is and don't run away with it. Like, I have all or nothing thinking, which is part of what I talk about in therapy, where I'm very like, I meet someone and it's like, we're either going to be best friends or we're going to be nothing. And my therapist is like, what if you are acquaintances? What if you are more casual friends? And I feel like that, you know, I've talked so much on this podcast about like the friendship zones and how, you know, you have your like your social media friends, your like your acquaintances, your good friends, your close friends, your best friends, and people move in and out of zones in different seasons. And so I feel like part of what is stressful is when people are shifting from being like a close friend to more of an acquaintance. I feel like that's not usually a conversation that you have. Like, you don't typically go to your close friend and say like, hey, I don't feel like we're close friends anymore. Let's downgrade each other to level 2 friends. Like, it's usually more over time. Like, one of my best friends, that over the past, I think 8-9 years now, this guy has been one of my best friends. And like, we went from seeing each other at least once a week to like monthly to almost like, no, I don't want to say almost immediately. It was gradual over time that we just saw each other less. We were talking less. And suddenly I looked up and like 6 months had gone by and I hadn't seen her talk to him. And part of it is because he got a girlfriend, where almost always when my male friends get girlfriends, they stop talking to me for whatever reason. Like, I don't know if they feel like it's inappropriate to have alone time with a girl that's not their girlfriend or whatever it is, but I pretty immediately was like, all right, he's got a girlfriend, like we're not friends anymore. And it wasn't necessarily because I didn't want to be friends anymore, but it was like, that's the expectation that I have, because historically, when I am close friends with a man that gets a girlfriend, he stops talking to me. And this guy kind of did the same thing. You know, but I never like reached out to tell him that like I was worried about that. I kind of was just like, I'm going to let it run its course. We'll probably have a conversation about it. I think I'm going to see him in a few weeks. So we'll probably have a conversation about it, since now I'm thinking about it and I'm thinking like, I'm kind of bothered by this. Like, I do actually want to talk about that and see where we are. But, you know, so many of us like write stories. And like I had mentioned to you guys last week that I had asked a friend, like I was like, hey, let's discuss let's discuss our friendship. Like, let's discuss what friendship is to you and what it is to me, and like what our needs and wants are. And how we're showing up for each other. Like, what am I doing well as your friend? What can I improve on? You know? And she said, let's talk about this after the trip. And then I told you guys, like, I'm going to respect that. And clearly, like, I have to, like, I can't force her to have the conversation before she's ready. But in the meantime, I've already had the conversation with her in my mind. And I've gone through all of the different scenarios of what I think how I think she's possibly going to answer the questions, what I think she's possibly going to say to me. And like, I'm going to keep doing that until she and I have the conversation, because that's just how my brain works. It's the same thing of like I told you guys about last week about the friend of mine who I kissed, and then he tried to go too far and I got really upset, and like that turned into a whole thing. I wrote this man a beautiful, very eloquent letter about my feelings, and he ignored me. And I'm so bothered by it. Like, I'm so bothered by it. And I honestly, like, y'all know I love to write a man a letter. But I honestly do not know, like, if he is ignoring me or if he just hasn't had time to read it, because this man historically doesn't respond to messages. Like, he's the kind of guy that, like, you call him and he'll answer and be like, hey, I'm in a meeting. Can I call you back as soon as I'm out? And you're like, yep. And then he doesn't call you back for 3 months. Like, that's just how he is. He's married to his job. And so I have gone through all of the different scenarios of, like, he feels terrible, so he's just never going to speak to me again because he can't face me, or he thinks that I'm in the wrong here and he's not, and so he's just not going to talk to me, or like he's embarrassed, or like he just honestly just didn't see it, or he got the message and he was like, that's too long, I'm not dealing with it, and just deleted it, or he hates me and he doesn't care to preserve a 10-year friendship and it's just gone just like that, and he doesn't care. And I go back and forth between all these things, and at the end of the day, it's like, there's no way to know unless he tells me. And like, I could ask, but I'm not going to, because I need him to come to me and apologize. But similar to like ex-situationship man is like not talking to me anymore, and I have decided that like he wants nothing to do with me and he's just not interested in being friends anymore either, but he hasn't said that to me. So like at this point, our conversations are kind of like every 3 weeks I like check to see if he's alive. And he lets me know that he's alive. And that's pretty much it. I mean, look, this dude could be married at this point and I would not know, because we are that polar opposite of like not speaking. But the one thing that really stuck with me that he told me when we were hanging out is like, it is never you. Most of us are so like wrapped up in our own stuff that we're just not thinking about it. So he's like, when I'm not reaching out to you or like not reaching back, it's almost always me. Like I'm going through something or whatever, like it's not you. And if it is you, I will either tell you or I will very directly just like block you and like never respond. And so I try to keep that in mind in terms of, I know everybody's like, if he wanted to, he would, which like he doesn't want to date me. So that's why he's not. Well, many reasons, mostly drugs. But basically I say that to say, like, I think it's helpful for people to keep in mind of like our brains often write stories. Like we fill in the blank. It's like we call someone and they don't answer, and I shouldn't even say we. Me personally, I call somebody and they don't answer and I'm like, they hate me. They don't want to talk to me. And then I'm like, okay, maybe that was extreme. Maybe they're just busy. Maybe this, maybe that. And I wish that I could call someone and they not answer and then we just move on with my day and like not even think about it. But that's not how my brain works. So, but it's like, it's important for me to know that's how my brain works. And it's also important for my friends to know that's how my brain works, because that's part of why Cameron is so good about saying like, hey, I'm not answering the phone because I'm doing XYZ. Are you good? What do you need? And it's because he knows that what my brain does, it just like, it's a million miles a minute. It's just like running and making up stories and, and just being crazy. So I think that's one of the things that like to know about me, and like that I want to know about my friends too, is like, am I loving you well? And if I'm not, how do I love you better? I'm going to leave you guys with a question today on more of a dumb topic but it's an analogy to a deeper thing. So basically it's an analogy to the whole conversations we were having around like, do you do whatever the birthday girl does or not? Because there was basically the main divide was like the whole, you're not required to set yourself on fire to keep somebody else warm, where like I talked to a lot of you that were like, I'm just like you. Like I sacrifice myself for my friends. Like I care so much about my friend having a good time. I don't care if I'm freezing. I don't care if my feet hurt. I don't care if I'm drunk in the rain having a terrible time. As long as my friend is having a good time, like that's what I'm going to do. And then there were other people that were like, no, I care about my comfort, and your comfort is not more important than mine, even if it's your birthday. Don't care. So basically my question is, let's say that you keep your house at a certain temperature, okay? Like for me personally, I like my home between 65 and 68 degrees. My sister likes her home more like between 75 and 78 degrees. So if my sister comes to visit me or if I go to visit her, right, does the homeowner adjust their temperature to make their guest comfortable for however long the guest is staying? Or does the homeowner say, this is my house and I want to be comfortable because I'm in my own house, and so you either turn on a fan or get a blanket or whatever it is? And so my answer to this is usually I err on the side of wanting my guests to be comfortable. So typically, like, I will tell my guests, like, I keep it what other people feel is really cold in here. And the reason I say what other people feel is because it's all perspective, right? So somebody has said to me before, like, wow, you really like to be cold. And I was like, no, I don't. But then I had to think, like, we have different definitions of cold. Because personally, I do not enjoy being cold. I think being hot and being cold are both uncomfortable. I like to be comfortable, but I will stand outside in shorts and a tank top when it's 70 degrees and be comfortable. Like, it takes a lot for me to be cold. And the rest of my family is not that way. So like my mom is like constantly asking me to put a coat on when it's what she deems cold outside, when I am like, I'm not wearing a coat because that's actually a comfortable temperature for me to just be outside in my sweats. And if I put a coat on, I'm going to get hot and be uncomfortable. So that's why I say, like, a lot of people think 65 degrees is really cold, which to me, it's not cold, it's comfortable. So that's why I say, like, when I have guests stay with me, I usually tell them, like, I keep my home at what many other people tend to think is really cold. So if that's really cold to you, let me know, because I can either turn the heat up. I also have a bunch of blankets that I can give you. And I kind of go from there. Like, if I can just bundle them with blankets, then I keep the temperature set for me, because I cannot fall asleep if it's over 68 degrees. Like, I just won't. So it's really difficult for me when I visit my sister, because it's really hot in her house to me. She's not hot, she's comfortable. And I turn the fan on and I just can't fall asleep. Like, I have a really hard time sleeping at my sister's house because it's way too warm in there. But I never ask her to turn on the AC and make it cold for me, because then she would be uncomfortable. And I mean, my sisters don't stay with me. They stay with my parents when they're in town. But if they were to stay with me, like, I probably would turn my heat up and I would just be uncomfortable and struggle to sleep, because I would rather them be comfortable. But I'm just curious. So, like, that's my question, is when there are vastly different preferences in temperature and there's a guest staying, like, who gets to choose, like, what the temperature should be? How do you decide what to set the temperature at? And I think a lot of people would probably say, like, why don't you guys just compromise and make it like 72 degrees? And I feel like, because in that case, both people are uncomfortable, which, hey, maybe that's your answer, right? Because like I said, anything above 68 and I can't fall asleep. And 72 is cold to my sister. So it's just like, it's like you could compromise and put it somewhere in the middle, and then you're both. So is that what you do? Like, are both people uncomfortable, or one or the other? Anyways, email your answer to realhonestpod@gmail.com. Okay, bye.
I'm not here to sugarcoat, life's already a bumpy road. Too much shelter causes pain, let's just be real honest. Things are gonna knock you down, avoidance will not help you out. Let's talk it through here, keep it real.